when I think. Mostly in language A. But sometimes I think in languages B and C for different reasons. Like, to warm up for a conversation in that language, or just for the heck of it, for fun, to use the slang. But language P I never think in, because it always makes me wet my pants. I speak English and Spanish and I'd say is about 60-50. I think more often in English but I always curse in Spanish. But I think my dreams are in Spanish, I can't really remember dialogues. A mix of Arabic, English, and French, I don't do it willingly, it just happens. Efficiency or something? Je sais pas Macron __/ Macron. I am a native English speaker and speak Russian and Italian. I mostly think in English, but I cuss or say small phrases in both Italian and Russian in my head. Have mentioned this many times before, I don't have an inner voice, so don't think in any language. I basically just do things. All of them. It's confusing. Well, when on my phone English the whole time. When working or in general in Spanish. When angry Italian, I just realized cursing in Italian feels so good, maybe because nobody understands. I'm throwing another one into the setting category. I think in English for the most part as I live in Toronto, but it switches to Japanese when with Japanese native speakers. Changes again to Cantonese when in southern China. I only learned English at school, so I can't understand why I sometimes think in English. Egg fuck is for me as natural as cart, so I didn't learn English only at school, I also watched some videos and TV series. I know both English and German. I think in English since I was born in the US. A blend of French and English. I also sometimes start a sentence in a language and then switch to the other language without realizing it. Both. At least for me, is easier in English, and I'm more used to it, but sometimes I need to think in Spanish or I won't be able to focus on something very specific like asking something in class. For some reason I feel less stupid if I say something in English in my head, but feel stupid if I say that same thing out loud in Spanish. I guess I like thinking in English because I feel more secure about my own thoughts, you know. I speak Swedish, English, some German and some Finnish. I think in Swedish, but sometimes English / a British accent. I curse in English or Finnish and German is useless. Depends on what language I'm exposed to at the time. Mother tongue is French, so it's obviously usually French, but English tends to creep in when working, or browsing Reddit, or watching an English show, or when I get tired, which makes absolutely no sense. Rarely, when in Spain or around Spaniards, some bits may come through my head in my very broken Spanish, which usually confuses the F out of me. I moved to America at the age of 6, so I mostly think in English. However, if I want to pretend like there is a different me with different personalities, I think in Vietnamese, usually arguing with myself. American Sign Language. I speak English and French, but I don't use my French very much anymore. I went to French school till grade 12 though, and still do math in my head in French, but otherwise I'll think in the language I'm speaking, so usually English. I'm trying to learn Japanese though, and common phrases in subbed anime will pop into my head in Japanese if I read the English words sometimes. In Klingon. My native language is Spanish. I learned English when I was 13 and I believe it took me about maybe 7 to 10 years to be able to think in both. I think in English often, though I am Korean. I think in Spanish, unless it's math. Native language English. I am Brazilian and know English. I usually think in Portuguese, but while writing or thinking of my future life, I think in English. I speak around 8 languages, not perfect of course, I still need to learn a lot, but usually I think in my native language or / and English. Edit 1, I sometimes think in other languages as well as French, German or Japanese, but mostly in my native language and English. Sometimes in English, sometimes in Finnish. I think in 3 languages. That is one brainer. I don't know if I think. my mother language, but I often think with English words and phrases in between. My social studies teacher from a few years ago was from somewhere just outside of Russia and moved to Afghanistan when she was in middle school. She finished middle school and then moved to America. I asked her this same question and she said she always thought in her native language. I guess it just depends on the person. It depends on setting/context for me. Ethnically Korean, raised in US. Talking to my elders, who only speak/understand Korean, and my Korean tutor. I think/speaking Korean. At school or doing homework, I think/speak in English. Talking with my brother, I think/speak in a mix of English and Spanish. We both learned Spanish at school. Like, whenever we speak, we'll answer each other in English or Spanish or sometimes both. Hey, hermanito necesito su ayuda. Hey bro, I need your help. ¿Qué pasa? What's up? I need you to tune my guitar. Again? Yo lo hice la semana pasada. I did it last week. My brother and I hardly use Korean with each other, but sometimes I will do it when words from English or Spanish escape me. When I'm alone with myself, a weird mix of English, Korean, and Spanish, I'll replace words with its counterpart in another language. For example, ¿Dónde está? Where is my laptop? Oh, there it is. I like to think I have what I call a language filter in certain situations, and when I'm tired, it is non-existent. I recently answered my grandmother in Spanish and she had this confused look on her face until I asked what I had said. My sister who overheard it told me and grandma that it was Spanish. Being multilingual is a blessing and a curse at the same time. When I am preparing to speak another language, I start to think in that language. I speak English natively, but I am mostly fluent in Spanish. If you were to come up to me and start speaking in Spanish, I would need a moment to start thinking in Spanish before I can respond and would likely need you to repeat what you said. I'm Argentinian, I speak Spanish all the time. But as I work in an office that works for the US most of the time, I usually think in English and sometimes I have to communicate in English too. Also, there's some random thoughts in my head in Portuguese too, lol. When I am just thinking, or speaking in Hungarian, I think in Hungarian. But when I speak English, I think in English. My preferred one, English. If I'm exclusively surrounded by another language, I'm in Japan with Japanese people, and I'm actively using it. Then Japanese until I'm on my own again, usually. Exceptions would be like writing an essay, etc. Then it's usually easier to just switch to the target language entirely. Also depends on skill. If I speak it at a native level, it just doesn't matter which I think in. If I'm a bit more rocky, I'd be more inclined to think in that language to make sure I have all my words in order, don't get confused or stutter, distracted, etc. Not me, but my Spanish teacher. He said after he talks in Spanish, he thinks in Spanish until he doesn't know a specific word, then he fills it in with English. This is kinda complicated. I am a native Turkish speaker who speaks fluent English and French. On day-to-day basis, when I am thinking, I think in English, I talk to myself in English, I go on to deep questionings about myself in English, etc. But when I have to think quick about something, am I gonna take this train or that train? I think in Turkish. When it comes to French, I swear in French and English when I'm reacting to something sudden, like when I drop something I would probably say emd or sht. Without even thinking about it. It is so natural to me, but it comes off pretty pretentious to other people, so I pretend to avoid it if I can. I hope it makes sense. Spanish then auto-translate to English. Usually English. But if I'm around a lot of Russian speaking or media, I'll think in Russian. Spanish that knows how to speak English, I usually think in both. When I'm in the car without the radio, I usually think in English, but when, for example, I'm thinking about something I want to talk about to my friends, I do it in Spanish. Either one works for me. I literally have no idea. My mind is constantly switching between Spanish and English, and I don't know when I'll think what in either language. Whatever language I'm talking in. Though I'm strongly English dominant at this point. But I still can't speak Spanish properly without thinking in Spanish. English. It's easier as I've lived most of my life in Canada. In Romance languages, I start with Latin. English, the universal language. All of them. Second and first. Depends on location. Ordinarily in English, if I go into Chinatown in London it will switch to Cantonese, in Beijing I mostly thought in Mandarin. Also changes in moments of stress or extreme sleepy, in these situations it can mix. I've been really stressed and my thoughts are muddling between English, Manchu, and Mandarin. English. English. Although it's not my first language, I have always done that. For no reason that I can muster from the top of my head. Depends on the emotion. My native language is Portuguese, but most of the videos I watch on YouTube are in English. The language I think on depends on the context. For example, if I'm thinking of something that happened in real life, I think in Portuguese, but if I think of a video I watched or a comment I made on YouTube or Reddit, I think in English. Sometimes I speak English so much it starts to sound like my native language. When this happens I write my comments in Portuguese and then translate them to English. It helps making Portuguese sound like my native language again. I wrote this comment in Portuguese and then translated it into English. Well, actually I know only Polish and English and some German, but not much, but sometimes I think in English and sometimes in Polish. C++. It's faster for me to count and think of my ABCs in Spanish, my native language, but for other day-to-day thoughts I think in English for the most part. It's funny when I can't remember a word in either language. This might not really count, but I've been reading Latin for some years now, and while I probably could respond slowly to someone speaking to me, I don't normally speak it out loud. That being said, I have noticed that sometimes I think in Latin grammar, but in English. For example, if I've been reading a lot of Latin recently I may think of that's his book, in the Latin sense, and think, that's the book which is for him. I don't necessarily think in Latin, since it is in English, but I use some of those syntactical forms in a language you really don't use them in. Am I the only one who doesn't think in languages? I just think. In thought? It depends on where I am and what I'm thinking about. For example, if I'm doing math I always do it in English, but when thinking about schoolwork or mythology, my major, I always think in French. When I'm extremely emotional, my native language. When I'm normal, English. I feel like I put on a mask whenever I speak English. A mask that I don't really hate. I don't get too angry, I don't get too sad. English stabilizes me. But when I'm thinking in my native language, my emotions just get amplified for some reason. In whatever language is most convenient at the time. Russian at home, Hebrew at school, English online. I pretty much think in English all the time when I'm writing or just being online, but when someone talks to you in a different language you can't help but start thinking in the one that you're hearing, so I guess it's a kind of a reflex. The most fun part of speaking multiple languages is finding ways to fuck up the basic grammar by making a Frankenstein monster out of a bunch of languages. I speak Korean, Spanish, and English. Parents are from Korea and was born/raised in a Spanish-speaking country. I alternate between Spanish and English depending on what I'm doing. Most of the media I consume is English, so I tend to think in English a lot. I rarely think in Korean just because it's my weakest language. I switch back and forth. It's weird. No rhyme or reason. English usually. However, when I memorized the first 40 digits of pi, I used Chinese because each digit is one syllable. Usually in my native language, but like when I'm exposed to English for a long period of time, like just now, browsing through Reddit, I start having thoughts/reactions in English. So I guess it depends. In a French Canadian and not too many people in the province of Quebec speak English fluently, so I mostly use it online. That being said, WE is most convenient for my thought process. If I can't recall a word in a language, I probably know something close enough in the other. As the years go by, I tend to think more and more in English. Russian is my native language, to the point where I sometimes have to force my brain to stop and awkwardly switch to thinking in Russian whenever such a need arises. I just asked my dad and his first response was C++. He needs to go outside. It depends. Sometimes I don't even notice what language I'm using. But I think in English and in my native language, it mostly depends on what language was spoken/read before. To be totally honest, sometimes in both at the same time. I'm a native English speaker, I speak fluent Spanish, and sometimes it is hard to separate the two from each other, even in my thoughts. I will be trying to say something in one language and all my brain comes up with is the right word but in the wrong language.